homemade traditional Peruvian dessert, alfajores, basket of ham, beef, turkey, veggie gourmet sandwiches. Call Giveaways Catering, phone number 778-245-3007. Our Immigrants Magazine's program just turned 3 years. 3 beautiful years. This fabulous project came out on air in 2012. Since then, we have been unstoppable in searching of valuable stories. In honor of those stories, our team has decided to choose a story of the month. A story you watch, you enjoy, and reminds you that being immigrant, everything is possible if you wish. The story of the month starts with Ingrid Beken from Belgium. You can notice how splendid she is when she's telling her story and how enthusiastic she was in front of her difficult moments at that time. Ingrid Beken from Belgium, in our Tell Us Story segment.
Yeah, I always say like the grass is greener on the other side, because you know, when you go to another country, you miss everything from your old country. For example, you know, coming from Belgium to Canada, all the time I'm saying like, okay, what I miss is you know, the family connections. I miss the architecture. I miss the good food over there. But you know, like, oh, I wish I was back home, you know, I'm homesick, you know, all the politics are much better, etc. But when I'm over there and somebody's trying to say something negative or say like, oh, that's weird in Canada, then I says like, no, you know, in Canada we have the beautiful nature and we have all the community centers. So I find out that when I'm in Canada, I miss Europe and I miss the stuff that I cannot find in Canada. When I'm in Europe, I miss everything that, you know, is in Canada, but it's not in Europe. So I know that it's just more like wishful thinking, like you bring something from the past to the present, but wherever you go, you will always miss something from the place that you left behind. Yeah, so there are commonalities between social work and criminal psychology, is that you both work on human beings. So in social works, you know, you try to look at the individual, you look at the individual's personality, the individual's circumstances, and you try to really put the individual in a bigger perspective. Well, when you go to criminal psychology, you actually focus really on the individual and how the brain is working and the psychology behind it. So it's actually more narrow than social work, because social, you know, the name social work already says social. So it's an individual within the environment, within your own past, within your own family circumstances, and like that. So when criminal psychology is also especially about the brain of a criminal, or what's the psychology behind it. And also sometimes, you know, society can identify somebody as being criminal, or maybe in another society that person is not criminal. Right? Like, let's say, for example, if I drive on the right side of the road in Belgium, that's not criminal. But, you know, if I drive on the right side of the road in England, you know, that's a criminal act, you know, a civil criminal act. And it's the same, you know, what is it about people that make them deviant from society? Because in one society this is accepted, in another society it's not accepted. You know, I graduate. My parents always said, you know, after high school, you need to get a degree, and then you can decide what you want to do. And my mom always read a lot of books, and, you know, we met a lot of people, you know, from other cultures. And so it was just fascinating, because I've always been interested in other people and other cultures. So my mom and my dad says, okay, go to school, then afterwards, you know, you can go and travel, but you need to have a degree to fall back on. So yes, you know, I first, you know, finished my social work studies, and then I tried to find a job in social work. But the economy was not too great at that point in time, so I could find a job related to social work, you know, working in a group home, but it was not really my profession. So I said to myself, it's like, you know, I really, really want to see the world. And, you know, yes, I don't have money to travel, but, you know, what about doing volunteer work? because that's going to help me later on if I go and work as a social worker, because I will understand other cultures and how they think and how they feel and what they eat. So that's why I applied for like volunteer work in Africa and the Marshall Islands. And so, and the more I traveled, the more I wanted to travel. Actually, really funny, because that had nothing to do with social work. That was actually building a school. And we were in the middle of nowhere, and there was no running water, there was barely any electricity, there was a generator over there. And there were actually people from the United States. They were doing a project for like, I think 3 to 6 weeks, some people from South Africa, and then me from Belgium. And so I liked it so much that I went to the project leader and I said to the project leader, like, how can I make a difference in 3 weeks or in 6 weeks? Can I please stay for 3 months? And he said, sure, you can do that. So after all the other volunteers went home, we built a school in the middle of nowhere. Then my job became with 2 of the other volunteers who stayed behind to work in a joint project between UNICEF and ADRA. And so we were finding out about children's death, because the locals would always say the children died because they had TB or they were underfed, etc. But actually found out a lot of kids, they were dying because of AIDS, because AIDS in Malawi is very, very rampant. So we had to find out, we had to go to little villages all over the place. And I didn't do most of the work, I just kind of helped out. And then also we had to go to refugee camps, because Malawi is bordering to Mozambique. And so that was, the end of the war there. So we had all those refugees coming from Mozambique into Malawi. And so then part of the project was, for some Portuguese-speaking people to encourage them, but also give blankets to them, give food to them, and, give first aid, first necessary things that they needed, yeah. Well, in one way, it was very difficult. In one way, go to the United States after I came back from Europe was a very dreamlike, right? Difficult because, when I was coming from, I was in Africa, Malawi, then I went to Belgium, and then when Belgium, I went to the United States. So the culture was very different. I found out everything was big in the United States. The roads are big, the houses are big, the plates of food are big. People are very, very friendly, but I found out that it was often surface friendliness. Like, for example, in Belgium, when you meet a person and you really like them, you will say, come to my house anytime, right? And you mean it. If you meet a person and you don't really click, you will not extend that invitation. Well, in the United States, I found out, like, people say, come to my home anytime. Well, I'm coming from Belgium, and you don't have to make an appointment, you just show up. So I would show up at people's homes, and then their face would change, and they would say to me, like, what are you doing here? And I was like, you said come by anytime. So, but I realized, that was very, very different. What I was very dreamlike about being in the United States was that life is, if you have a good job, it's cheaper, right? I was lucky that my job had benefits. Because I find out, if you don't have benefits in your job, you either have very rich people or very poor people, and then the in-between class. I was lucky that I had insurances and stuff like that. So for me, housing was really cheap over there, food was really cheap, and my love to travel, I could expand on that. First, my co-workers were all from Mexico, and so they taught me about their culture, and so they encouraged me to go to Mexico. And, you could get cheap flights, or they say like, oh, United States is so big, you should go to Santa Fe, or you should go to Arizona. So I would jump in my car, and I worked 4 days a week, and I always had 3 days off. And yes, you work 40 hours minimum. You work really, really, really hard. Mm-hmm. And then just in the weekends, I would just take off, and I would meet, other people, and we would just explore the country. First within California, then, in the states around. Then I would start flying to New York for a weekend or Boston for a weekend. And I was able to do that because the money was good, not great, but it was so cheap at that point in time to live. So that was a dreamlike existence that I had, because I was suddenly living like in the movies, right? The first cup of coffee that you're holding in your hand. In Europe, you don't do that. Maybe it's changing. You have a cup of coffee and you sit in the cafe, but you will not walk on the street with a cup of coffee in a cup. you drink from the real, how you call that, porcelain, right? So yeah, so it was quite different to make friends there as well, right? The way I developed my career in the United States was that when I took my master's degree in clinical social work, and because I came from Europe, my European degree had a different value than the American degree. So as a result, I could actually condense 2 years of a master's degree into 12 months. So while I was doing that, I had no intention to stay in the United States. But I was dating a guy at that point in time who was actually living in California. And he said like, hey, if you wanted to give it a chance, why don't you try to get a job? And it's like, okay, I'll try. So I found out that if you have a master's degree in the United States, you can actually apply for 1 year postgraduate study, a working permit. So I said like, okay, I will find a job. Luckily, there was an advertisement in California, and I had a friend in California as well, who says like, well, if you're willing to work outside the big city and you go to an underprivileged area, then it's much easier to get that 1 year postgraduate working permit. So I said, okay, sure, let's try it. So I tried, and immediately I said like, well, I know you're looking for somebody for long term. However, if you're going to hire me, I need to go through the working permit process, and that's going to take a month. I'm willing to work for free for a month until my papers come through, if you're willing to give me a chance. And they said yes. So as a result, I worked a month for free. My papers came through. I worked for a year. I loved my job. I was working as a child and family therapist with children 0 to 18. And so in a Hispanic neighborhood. So all my coworkers, or most of my coworkers were Hispanic, which was really wonderful because it was like I was in a different country in the United States. And so I loved it, and my employers liked me, and so they said, okay, do you want to stay longer? And I said yes. So I got a lawyer, I applied for a working permit. I got a working permit for 3 more years, and then I was able to extend it for 3 more years. So, but yeah, it was a very challenging work, but very rewarding work.
The economy has changed in many ways around the world. On the one hand, people get an excellent job offer, and on the other hand, people get laid off overnight. In today's economy, all members of the family have to work, parents and their children. Are you 21 years old and looking for a job? And what to do? Employment tips segment next.
Hi, I'm Gwen Pawlikowski, and this is your employment segment. During today's segment, I'd like to talk about some of the difficulties that people have finding jobs when they're quite young. And what I mean by young, I guess, is anywhere between the age of 15 and 25, let's say. Now, this is an age that it can be hard to find a job in. And the main reason is because people in this age group don't tend to have a lot of experience. Most of their time has been spent in education, and so they don't have a lot of paid work experience. So youth unemployment is higher than unemployment for people of other ages. So what are some ways that you can overcome this barrier? Well, let's talk about them. The very first thing that you need to do is understand that a lack of experience is the issue, and that's the issue, really. So we have to think about ways to get experience. The first way to get experience is by volunteering. That's a great way to gain skills, gain references, and you can put volunteer experience on your resume. So as a young person, if you don't have paid work experience, consider doing some volunteering for the kind of job you'd like to be paid for in the future. Another way that you get experience is through education, and this is probably something that you already have. You just have to think about it in a different way. So if you took a class in high school that taught you some practical skills, or in university you gained some practical skills in a class, you can actually write this on your resume. Let me give you an example. The first one I can think of is a class that my son took in high school, which was about metal fabrication and jewelry making. So during this 4-month class, he actually learned how to shape metal and do some metal welding and to form it into earrings and bracelets and necklaces. And this is a beginning skill. Of course, he's not a professional jewelry maker, but it's something that he's learned and something that can be written on a resume. So think back to the kind of practical learning that you've done and the practical experience that you have gained through education and reframe that. Write about it on your resume in the education section. That is another way to add experience to your resume. And even though you're young, those are skills that you've gained, and that's experience. Now, maybe you don't have a lot of those educational courses yet. Well, the great news is there are a lot of great short courses that you can take that will give you practical skills right away. For instance, if you're really young, babysitters courses, they're available everywhere at community centers and many, many kinds of places. Community centers are the most usual ones. That's a great way to get your first job, a babysitter job. Another great course for young people is Food Safe. Food Safe is a course you can take online, and it's really essential in any kind of restaurant job or any job where you're working with food, and food service tends to be a beginning job for a lot of people. Take a Food Safe course. It gives you really great practical knowledge that can apply to jobs in your future. So those short-term certificate courses are really helpful. Another kind of hot and trendy course that I see people writing about online right now are courses in coding. So there are many kinds of computer programs for coding, and you can learn them for free on many online learning places like Allison.com or Coursera. So many places have absolutely free courses where you can gain really practical skills. And guess what? When you complete that course, there's a record that they keep of your learning, and you can actually write that you've completed that course, or sometimes they have a diploma. You can write that you've completed that on your resume. And that shows, again, more experience, more skills that you have. So getting experience and reframing the experience that you have, those are two really great things that you can do to overcome the disadvantage of being young and the disadvantage of not having a lot of experience. But let me add one more point. While maybe not having a lot of experience is sometimes seen as a disadvantage, being young and having a great open attitude is often seen as a huge advantage. So show that when you're applying for work, when you're having interviews, when you're talking with people in your network. Show them your great, keen attitude and show them how excited and enthusiastic you are about learning. Along with your enthusiasm, make sure that you're showing humility. Okay? You want to sound confident, you want to sound, of course, able to learn, but you don't want to sound like a know-it-all either, right? So keep that in balance. Show them how much you want to learn, show them what you've learned so far, and show them your positive feeling toward learning. Because a lot of people are really keen to teach you and to help you grow and develop in your career. So those are three main things that you can do to overcome the barrier of being young and having no experience as you look for ways to get your career going. This has been your employment segment. Thanks very much for watching.
Pooja Ruprell, who presents the next segment. It took several years to leave her country, India. Now in Vancouver, she's a successful writer. Pooja Ruprell, and Living in Peace and Happiness. Next.
Welcome back to our segment on living in peace and happiness. We've been talking about happiness for the last 2 times. We spoke about what is happiness, what happiness means to me. The next segment we spoke about how can I be happy. We're going to talk a little today about 2 different things. The first one we are going to talk about is money and happiness. There's a lot of focus on material things these days, right? We all want the next fancy car, we want the bigger home, we see our neighbor getting a large fancy TV, and so we want that same TV, or they get a fancy couch or whatever it is. We're all striving for something material, and marketing these days is constantly, people are becoming so good at it. We're constantly being convinced that we cannot do without the next fancy gadget that's out there to help us be happy. But that's not the truth, because as we've seen over time, today I buy a new computer, the technology is obsolete, and within a few months, maybe a couple of years, and soon there's something else that's coming that's more advanced that we are all running after. So it's endless. It's endless. There are too many options in the material world that we can go after, but none of them guarantee us happiness. Money definitely is not a guarantee for happiness. I could be the richest person in the world, but if I'm alone and going to bed alone every night, I don't have any family, I don't have fulfillment at work, truly, yes, money will give me the comfort. I'll have a lovely bed to sleep in, I'll have a fancy home, but that is not going to guarantee me any happiness. So material things are definitely no guarantee for happiness. Happiness is something I get from more than material things. It's my experience. When I experience togetherness, when I experience laughter with a friend, the joy that fills my heart is far more meaningful, and all of us have experienced this, than going to a store and buying a $100 dress, right? So money definitely won't give us happiness. The other thing that there is a lot of focus, and I see that in the youth, right? A lot of focus around relationships, and lots of people getting divorced, relationships coming apart, and people feeling unhappy. Relationships also are not a guarantee for happiness. I could be in a relationship today, so I'm going out with somebody, I'm finding joy in their company, and then an argument happens and that person no longer seems so interesting, right? I'm not willing to look beyond the fact that this person is not here to give me happiness, right? Nobody has to behave in a particular way or say something specific so that I can be happy, because I cannot control that, right? No matter how much I want somebody to tell me I love you, they can say the words, but if they don't mean that and they're not going to behave that way, it doesn't help me, right? So relationships or money cannot give me the joy, the peace that I'm searching. It has to be something that goes beyond all of these things, right? It's something deep within me that I have to pull up to experience that peace and joy and serenity within my life. I have to pull up within myself the strength, the wisdom, the compassion, the let go of the judgment, let go of the ego. And happiness is all to do about the things that are within me and nothing to do with anything or anybody that's outside of me. It's nothing to do with money, it's nothing to do with relationships, it's nothing to do with how many places I can visit. While all of that will give me happiness temporarily. None of that will give me long-lasting happiness. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Remember is to live again. Recordar es volver a vivir. Thanks, Ingrid Beken, for sharing with us your story in our The Immigrants Magazines program. Before closing this episode, I have a phrase for you. La recompensa de una buena acción está en haberla hecho. The reward of a good action is to have it done. Thanks for watching us.
El día que te conocí, me gusta mucho tu cuerpo, ¿sabes?
이렇게 손 이렇게 뻗어가.
Que mal administrado teve cerca de
El día que te conocí.
Problemas de relaciones interpersonales, separación, divorcio, problemas con niños, adolescentes y adultos.
Soy la doctora Yolanda Montoya, soy Clinical Counselor y mi teléfono es el 604-861-1071.
My best friend in the United States is from Finland, and she was engaged to a Canadian. So when they were engaged, and then afterwards when they were married, they say, oh, you need to meet his family. So, when I took my master's degree in Washington State, at Walla Walla University, it's just a few hours from the border. So we had a chance to come to Canada. And then, of course, since they lived in Washington State, I would all the time for Christmas, I say, okay, my adoptive family will be my Canadian Portuguese family. So I came here a lot. And each time when I came to Canada, I just like, wow, it's North America, it's gorgeous. You have the space you don't have in the little tiny country where I'm born and raised, Belgium. And I said, there's something about Canada that actually reminds me of